Hello and welcome to another episode of Off the Rock, your weekly rugby breakdown with me, John Ferguson, and I've got my mate from Scrumbags, Lachie from the pod that we all love, back with me today after a weekend of doing some rugby calls from what I hear, and also sinking some beers as well. So doing the good stuff. Lachie, welcome back. How you doing?
Good, mate. All about a balanced diet, and we'll get the pot up and running shortly. I've missed Mitch terribly. He's been over in South Africa, flouncing around, having a good time. But we'll be back on the air shortly. A pleasure to join you in the meantime.
Yeah, well, we're keen to get that one back in our ears. But yes, as you know, work-life balance is extremely important, and we've been seeing some great content out of Mitch in South Africa, especially particularly on safari. So, who knows? He'll be able to tell some proper jungle stories and hopefully some rugby stories as well from that side of the world. Now, if you're hearing me and I'm sounding a little bit blocked up, it's because I've spent the last couple of six days in bed sick. So, apologies if you hear any coughing throughout the pod, but we've got a heap to get through today. We've got Oz A, R360, Wallabies abroad, Wallabies in Japan, going head to head with Eddie Jones's Brave Blossoms in Japan. So a lot to get through. And as we get through that, we're going to make it a quick and snappy episode today, opposed from the long one from break, the last one that we released. But also, don't forget to like and subscribe below and give us a thumbs up, because we are literally just doing this out of the love of our hearts, and we love bringing you guys rugby content, and that's the way that you guys can help us. It doesn't cost us anything. It doesn't cost you guys a cent, actually, but it makes us feel extremely appreciated. So make sure you hit that like button and the subscription as well if you haven't already. Lachie, let's get straight in here, shall we? So the Oz A side went up north to Japan ahead of the Wallabies squad, and they delivered the Japan 15 an absolute thrashing. Australia A beating Japan 71-7 in Osaka. That was a hell of a game, and I thought that looking at the bench, that things might turn a little bit more in the favor of Japan 15 in the second half, looking at the strength of their bench, but it was just such a complete domination, Lockie, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a proper flogging, and again, with these fixtures, it's hard to take too much out of it. I don't think it informs too much of what we should expect in the weekend to come, where Australia faces Japan in full flight Test rugby. But gee, there's some great performances in there, particularly from fringe Wallabies or those looking to crack their way back into that touring squad.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Lockie, just going to stick with you for a second. Who impressed you out of the Wallabies like the Wallaby players that played in the Australia A squad, and then who are then going on to stick with the Wallabies on their Northern and the end of year tour?
Look, it's a tough one. There are plenty that put their hand up. I think the biggest one for me was probably Darcy Swain. Finding it really tough to crack that trio of Frost, Salakaia-Loto, and Williams. Of course, Skelton not available for the next few, but Darcy Swain's doing everything he can to put himself back in the equation. He pinched a couple of lineouts. He completely dominated that early exchange at set piece, and a couple of tries to boot as well. It's not just sort of forward play doing it in tight. It's really good motor from the big fella to back up line breaks and be there, be ever present. He is one of the more experienced players in that team, and it was wonderful to see him take that opportunity. I'm not sure whether it's the kind of performance that forces his way into contention when you do have Skelton available for three of the 4 Europe games, but it doesn't hurt his chances at all. It's great to see that depth. And when you throw in a performance from Matt Fazler as well, who I thought was excellent, leading the side back in hooker, where we're starting to see some excellent competition build among the tight forwards.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's nice to see Matt Fessler finally looking a lot fitter than he has previously. Obviously, been battling a fair few injuries, and as you and I mentioned last week in the pod, didn't look 100% in that Lions game when he made his. I think he played that game, and then he hasn't been seen since in national colours. So it was nice to see him there. I will say though, for the people listening, if you weren't aware, Hamish Stewart, Pete Samu, Matt Fessler, Josh Canham. And am I missing anyone else that's been picked in the Wallaby squad that played in the Oz A squad as well from that
Those are the four
list?
that have been locked in.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think out of those players, I think you did hit the nail on the head there with Matt Fesler. I thought that he was very good leadership wise, scored a try. He looked like he's really been working on his footwork. Not that it was bad before his injury, but it is one of those things when he's not the biggest player, he really is a player with high IQ. And we saw that throughout the season last year, where he's so good at the back of a maul. He knows exactly how to maneuver around it. Dave Parecki's been caught in the maul a few times at the back of it. Matt Fesler knows exactly when to break away from a maul, but it's really deteriorating. And I think that kind of rugby IQ is really, really handy to have, particularly at test level. And then I think out of the remaining players in Hamish Stewart, Josh Canham, Pete Samu, I wasn't overly taken with any of their performances. I thought that they had each had individual moments. I think Hamish Stewart probably would have liked to have been penalised less because he was penalised a fair few times and quite a dominant performance by the team. So that would have been frustrating for him to have to go through. Pete Samu, I just felt like he wasn't involved as much as I'd wanted him to see. I think that you and we talked at length last week about how his play style really suited Bordeaux, and that's how Bordeaux played quite wide. He made some good carries, he absolutely did, but I just felt like I didn't hear his name, or I didn't see him with ball in hand or making those big tackles enough. And Josh Canham probably guilty of being a little bit loose with the ball, and that's why I think when you highlight Swain, very very impressive because he was stellar at the line out. He worked incredibly hard. And I think one of the biggest critiques that I have of him now, not of history form, is that he might be a bit slower than most of our locks. Like he's a bit more lumbering than a lot of our locks. Like Jeremy Williams, very athletic. Nick Frost, we know he can motor. Obviously, Will Skelton with his size, but that's his point of difference. And even Lukan Salakaia-Loto has some decent mobility. But Darcy Swain really, really showed up and tried to really motor around the field. Extremely impressed with that part of his game. I want to throw a player at you, though, that's not in the Wallabies squad, Mac Greeley. Tell me a little bit about what you thought about his performance, because I tell you what, that white headgear knew how to go on Saturday.
I think people who have followed Super Rugby for the past couple of years would have seen so much growth in Greeley's game from when he was at the Reds with limited opportunities to going across to the Force. And I think that he really showed what he can do in an international arena. I don't think he's necessarily going to get picked up, but I wouldn't be upset if the Wallabies say, why don't you stick around for another week? Because he had some wonderful moments. Setting up your own kick with a setting up your own try rather with a little kick ahead and backing up for Swain's second. He had some great moments in the early exchanges that really helped set the tone. And I think having so much precedent of smaller, nippier wingers and fullbacks that's been championed by the Colbys and the Bielbaris of the world. There is a place for a Matt Greeley in the modern game, and he's putting up a pretty good case for himself. So I think having a specialist fullback like that would be advantageous for the Wallabies. Do you think that they'll come knocking after a game like that?
I think it'll be very much the same as what I mentioned last week, where there should injury strike. I think I like the look of what Mac really brings, particularly from a positional perspective. I thought that he was quite good at the back, even though he did share a lot of the backfield with Ben Donaldson, who dropped back quite often, and he was often the guy catching the high ball. So that was interesting to see. Mac didn't really get that moment to shine at fullback when receiving kicks, but obviously that was just part of the structure that they ran there. I think another player that you really need to look at is halfback at Teddy Wilson. I thought Teddy Wilson played very well. I think he was getting a bit frustrated with how the referee was how strict the referee was refereeing the breakdown, and he got pinged once, not pinged, but they turned over because he was too slow with getting the ball out. And I think that's just one of those things that when you get to this level, Teddy Wilson just needs to realize that like if that referee says use it and then he doesn't use it in 5 seconds, that's going to happen because there are other opposite players that are going to tell the referee you've told him to use it. And in the comms, Lachie, Teddy was saying, "You got to tell me to use it. Got to tell me to use it." I certainly heard it on the commentary, and it was a good 6 seconds for him to use it. So that was a shame. But I thought that he and Donaldson played quite well together. I thought Henry Robinson came off and played quite well as Harry McLaughlin Phillips. So I thought all the halves played pretty decently. Nothing stellar, I must admit, but I thought it was pretty good. Elsewhere on the back line, I thought Ollie Sapsford was absolutely dynamite. I thought that he did a lot of the ugly work that a lot of other players that no one really pays attention to, but I thought that he was absolutely rock solid in defense and attack.
Yeah, Sapsford's an interesting one because he's been around the Australian setup for a long time since I think he played a bit of New Zealand Sevens, Hawke's Bay for a long time, came across to the Brumbies, and they really rate him. He's been on a couple of these Aussie tours now. He's an older body, a more solid body, and being able to cover 11 through 14 is a really good quality to have as well. So I'm not sure whether he's the kind of player that will ever force his way into a Wallabies jersey, but what an asset to have a seasoned campaigner with a lot of those first class games that you accrue through New Zealand rugby. So great one of that. But I think we've got to talk about Ben Donaldson here because we saw him out on the field, across fullback, as you mentioned, across fly half. He was very solid, I think, without being spectacular. But what I really liked about his game was his kicking. He was able to position things really well against an admittedly inexperienced Japan 15, but it's an area that we've identified as being probably a bit of a low point across the fly halves that are going on the end of year tour. So I'd love to get your take on where Dono now sits in the pecking order after a performance like that.
I think his versatility is probably what does him the most, does the best for him, really. His ability to cover that 10-15, and he's probably quick enough to play wing as well. So like that he could do that if you put him in a 23 jersey. I wouldn't start him there, but you're right. He does have a big boot. He can kick well. Again, it wasn't an extraordinary performance. It was just solid. And I think from a game management perspective, I think that's what someone like Joe Schmidt wants to be looking at. Um, and I think again, the versatility. You look at Tane Edmund and Carter Gordon, they can't really play anywhere else. So I think that having a Ben Donaldson for a 23 jersey or something like that is pretty good. Yet to see how Carter Gordon goes. So I'm not going to say that Carter Gordon's ahead of Ben Donaldson or not in that sense because we haven't seen him play. But on form, you'd have to pick Ben Donaldson because Carter Gordon hasn't been in the game. But I think that you would benefit, you would get something out of adding Ben Donaldson to that squad. I think he's an older player now. I think we often forget that he's actually 26 now, mid 20s. He's not a young buck like Gordon or a Liner or something like that. He does have a few years on him, so he's a good addition. I'd also want to talk about the scrum. This was probably the least impressive aspect of the Oz A component. I thought that Isaac Aida was quite good in the loose. I thought that Linton Yelly again stepped up off the bench, really, really good. Ethan Dobbins tackled like a demon. But when it comes to the nuts and bolts of the scrum, I wasn't particularly impressed with Reese Van Neck. I didn't think that he dominated any particular aspect. And I think, again, Hilia neither really showed any sort of dominance at the scrum. And that's where I would have wanted us to see to take the Japan 15 to task. What did you see there at the set piece?
Yeah, it felt like a missed opportunity for Van Neck to really dominate as a tight head, and he's been around the edges of all of his call up for a while now, and that's his core, that's his rock. He's not a Tupou that's dangerous in the loose. Reese Van Neck is very much a scrum first, scrum second kind of
Mhm.
player. Good skill set, but it felt like the game that he could have dominated and really said, "Hey, you got to keep me around for this Japan game." So none of the props really shone for me. Although you're right to mention Niele, I'm constantly impressed by what he's able to do with his limited opportunities. So great to see that. And it just style points for Dobbins, the little flick pass out the side of the maul
Yeah.
to Henry Robertson. That's revoking your front row license straight away. So some good, but you're right, not in the key areas of a scrummaging forward.
He wanted some of that Len Ikitau action, and I don't blame him because that was awesome. Just one of the last things that I thought I'd mention on Oze before I pass to you to wrap anything on it. Stylistically, what really annoyed me with Oz A was that they didn't play at all like the Wallabies. Like they had a rush defense. Simon Cron brought his Western Force blueprint into this team. You could see that a few of the Western Force players, like Ben Donaldson, was very comfortable with the system, and that defensive system worked quite well. I mean, like as in that they only conceded 7 points, but it doesn't really matter what defensive system they were running. I think that you'd see that uh, they would have done pretty well anyway. And I think also they missed Wallabies. The Wallabies. Oz A made like half the amount of tackles. Oh, sorry, they made double the amount of tackles of Japan 15, but they both sides missed 11 tackles at halfway. So like I don't think that can say that it was a good defensive effort or a bad defensive effort. That's not what I'm saying. But it's just interesting that when you've got the team right below your national side, not having the same style to be able to carry on that because you want to be able to see continuity and progression and you want to be able to see one player transfer from one place to the other. It was just bizarre for me to see that. Although I thought that they played quite well and different styles do work, that from a continuity and alignment perspective made no sense.
Well, on the continuity front, it made no sense to me that Les Kiss wasn't in charge of that Aussie team. I mean, it's great to see Cronny get that opportunity at the next level, but when you know that you have a succession plan in place for Wallabies, why not feed into that with Les Kiss using that as an opportunity to get to know more of the players, more of the blueprint, um, give a little bit of his flavour without deviating from the Schmidt process, and also allowing the Reds to start backing up their coaching stocks too. So, I mean, the Reds have currently got 2 games against Panasonic down in Brisbane and Toowoomba. It seems like the kind of game that maybe Kissy could have taken for the Aussie, and we're not quite sure why. Maybe it's a case of wanting to stay well clear to avoid any of the scrutiny that comes from, kissing a Wallabies jersey while he's still contract to the Reds. But it seemed like a missed opportunity to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely great point there, Lachie. I think we'll move on if you don't have anything else left on Aussie. Well, it's good win. It's a shame there's not more games on Oz A, but that's just how it is, unfortunately. It were going to be 3 games in total, but now it's only been 1. Fingers crossed they can get some more coming on whenever that suits the Oz A pathways. Now we're going to head to R360, and R360 has been in the headlines now for a good long while. But the main thing that I do want to touch on here with you, Lockie, is the 10-year ban that Peter Vidlandis has come out with and said that if a agent or player talks, even I think it is the language is if you enter into negotiations or even talk to a member of R360 to be recruited, you can be handed a 10-year ban. So give me your hot takes. Give me everything here, Lockie, and then we can dig down into a little bit deeper afterwards.
Oh, I don't want to give the league more airtime than it needs. I think it's a pretty classic reaction from a not so benevolent leader to stamp a bit of authority around it. It's look, I think what it's actually done is pour more fuel on the R360 fire. Their scare tactics have gained a lot of headlines. It opens it up for response, and now R360's probably had more exposure in the past week than it had in the past 6 or 7. So I actually think it's backfired a little bit, particularly for league. But now there is a common standpoint between Australia's governing league body and the 8 tier 1 nations that stood up and said, no, we're going to ban you from test rugby. It's a strange point because we're roughly about a year out now, Fergo, from when R360 anticipates that they will get started. I'm not a particularly strong supporter of the idea. I think it does more harm than good, but I'm keen to see where you think they're at and how the recent news from both union and league governing bodies will affect that process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think before we get into what it's going to be and how it's going to impact, I think I just want to say that like where the funding for this R360 thing is coming from, because there's a lot of videos thinking that it's Saudi money, and I particularly a lot of rugby league players saying like the Saudis have heaps of money. My understanding is that's actually UK and US private equity firms and consortiums alongside a Swiss group that are funding the majority of this. So unlike Live Golf, it's actually not going to have an unlimited amount of cash like the Saudi the Saudi private equity fund or something like that, which is called the public something or other fund that funds a lot of the sport expansion groups that Saudi invests in. So I think that first of all, it's not a bottomless pit of money. But what I will say about the competition is that I don't understand the launching time for it with the targeting of Australian Rugby League players in the lead up to the 2027 World Cup when it's being played here. For me, that is like, I mean, also again, this is an Australian podcast. We're looking at it from particularly an Australian angle right now because we're talking about the NRL, which is an Australian body, and that's what we're talking about here. But realistically, R360 is a global competition. It's got millions of people involved around it in the terms that rugby's played by millions of people around the world, and there are people watching it from around the world. So this has actually not only got to do with Australia, but I just find it so weird that that's the time that they want to go pinching rugby league players because the home World Cup is even a thing that can draw players over to rugby union now at the moment, and so we'll go through some of the players that have been talked about here, and I don't want to give rugby league too much talking time, but players like Cam Munster, Ryan Pappenhausen, Xavier Coates from Melbourne Storm have been talked about. Payne Haas and Dean Mariner from the Broncos. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, who was previously with the All Blacks and now back in the Warrior system. I would love to see these guys play union. And for me, I couldn't care less if they couldn't go back to rugby league. Like Peter Vidlandis, I would love that. But I don't begrudge any players going to get more money. That's pretty much why some players go to rugby league here in Australia, to get more money, right?
The thing that sticks out to me about R360 is if players need to support their families or want to because you have a limited earning capacity, just go. I have no problem with seeing players from union or league go across and do it, but there are just consequences to that. And the response seems to be, why can't I have my cake and eat it too, with regards to eligibility for tests and things like that. It's a bit of a strange one. But also, Fergo, I feel like for R360 to really succeed and captivate the Australian audience and Australian players, why haven't they got a franchise planned for Australia? It seems very odd that they've targeted all these wonderful glamorous places like Portugal and over in Boston, or not exactly glamorous, but other sort of high profile global cities. And they want all these Australian players coming across, and you haven't given them an opportunity to be even slightly close to home. I feel like there'd be a lot more buy-in from the Australian public if R360 had actually gone, no, we're going to set up in Melbourne, we're going to set up in the world's sporting capital, and we're going to take you all on. Like that's the kind of thing that engages and engrosses an Australian audience and market. So I think, mate, I'm a bit sort of ambivalent towards it at this point. Like, I don't support it. I don't actually think it'll go anywhere at this point, but there's no reason for me to be excited by it either, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. I think there's too little detail known about anything to be able to exactly be excited about, and we don't even know what the blueprint is going to be like from a player perspective or a draw card perspective because
Or
no one's
teams,
signed on.
Fergo. We don't even have team names.
Exactly. So there's very little to get excited about. It's more so just the tense nature in the air that is about all this money. And from the NRL side, losing players. I mean, Rugby Australia also worried about losing players, but not right now because we have the Home World Cup. Players do not want to sacrifice that opportunity. That's our carrot. But in rugby league, they don't have carrots that come like that all the time for themselves. Like hosting a home World Cup doesn't have the same significance in Australia as in rugby league as it does in rugby union. So it's like that's just one of the great draw cards that we have at the benefit, and that's why we can kick that can down the road. Also because we've secured a lot of our talent for past the 2027 World Cup. So that's where that comes from. But like as a rugby union fanatic, you know, I'd support anyone who needs to support a family to be able to make the choices they need to make. And as you say, the actions have consequences. That's just the way that they're ruling about it. But also, if rugby league players do end up not playing rugby league and then getting banned for 10 years, you are more than welcome in rugby union. Come on over, play 2-3 years in R360, learn your craft, and then you're welcome to come and play rugby union because we know that you guys are supreme athletes and we know that you guys are extremely professional and we would love to have you in the game of rugby union. So if you want to go chase that cash and you're banned for 7 more years, then you've got 7 years to come and play union, whether it's in Japan, whether it's in France, whether it's in England, whether it's in South Africa, whether it's in Scotland. If Scotland is your vibe, you can go play Scotland, but also you're more than welcome to play here in Super Rugby Pacific as well. We've got a Fijian team, we've got a Pacifica team as well across the ditch, but we would love, that means that you guys actually could be eligible for Australia, believe it or not. So if that's how you guys want to roll, then you're more than welcome to do so. Lachie, anything else to touch on R360 before we move on?
Nah, I'm ready to talk some European rugby, mate.
I'm glad that you've gone European rugby straight away because we need to talk about the absolute show that James O'Connor put on for the Leicester Tigers, beating the English Premiership winners of 2024-25 that season. So last season's winners, Bath. That was a magical game. Honestly, James O'Connor controlled that so beautifully. And it's so funny because I don't know if it's Jeff Parling is the former line-out coach of the Wallabies. He was with the Wallabies all the way up until the end of the Lions tour and then left to become head coach of the Leicester Tigers. And he coached almost the exact same way. His structures, his systems, as Joe Schmidt did at the Wallabies, and that suited James O'Connor just fine because he was in stellar form. And you know what, Lachie, I know that you've been texting me a little bit about this, so you can talk to me a little bit about how his play style really featured because it was stellar.
Oh, it's just vintage Jock, and it's again a system in which he doesn't have to be the dominant kicker. So a lot of
Mm.
their kicks were coming out of Tom Whiteley at halfback, and it allows O'Connor's running game to shine, which has always been his best feature, I think, ever since we first saw him as a 17, 18-year-old in a Force jersey. He ends up carrying 8 times and is able to break and bend the line almost every time. So he's really good at finding a loose shoulder, busting through. He's never going to be the sort of 50 plus post contact meters, but he just attracts two defenders, and that created space for the players outside him to really start to shine. So watching him get the 10 jersey and run the cutter for almost the entire game. He wasn't there. The match winner was laid on by the replacement out of Tigers. It was a really exciting game at the end of the day, right? Like Tigers are down 20-19, and I think it's Billy Searle comes on and kicks a match winner. So up until that point, it had all just about been O'Connor, and that running battle that he had with Finn Russell is great
Mm.
to see. That's two quality tens going at each other. So nothing in that performance tells me that James O'Connor should be out of the squad. Come the Wallabies arriving to the UK, he needs to be there, and performances like this showed the versatility and the importance of experience.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I wrote a piece this week about the Wallabies depth chart, and I put that up on Rugby Pass. And in that, I wrote that James O'Connor is Australia's best fly half currently, and I think he just proved it. He made English Premiership, a battle like that of the absolute titans of the English Premiership, look like he was doing something with ease, and that's only because he knew the system, he knew how to find space, and he did not shirk any of the tough tackles. He was absolutely in everything, and for a 35-year-old who people have been saying like not the future of Australian rugby, etc., etc. He might not be, but he can very much be the present. And I tell you what, that is someone who I want on the field with the Wallabies every single time they run out, whether it's in jersey 22 or whether it's in jersey 10, because his composure, his ability to shirk off a mistake, much like his opposite Finn Russell, as you mentioned. Finn Russell, he chipped and chased down the left wing. He regathered and flicked past it in, and that was a beautiful piece of magic from Finn Russell, as we've been accustomed to. James O'Connor does the exact same thing in midfield, only beats two defenders with his step, and maybe I can't remember. It was in the second half. So Finn Russell's in the first half, James O'Connor's in the second half. It's just like you didn't see James O'Connor chip and chase and regather in Super Rugby Pacific, but he does a first game for the first starting game for the Leicester Tigers in the Prem. Like it's just he's got that he's got rugby on at the moment on level easy, and I think it is because when you go from Test rugby back down to club rugby, you all of a sudden realize how much more time and space you have. It doesn't matter what kind of defensive shape anyone's running, it's just comes down to the high quality of players that are at test level and how ingrained those systems are and how ruthless the standards are. Then when you get down to club rugby, you've realized you've got another, in at least in the Northern Hemisphere, you've got another 30 games ahead of you. So players might be, that might weigh on them mentally, but just James O'Connor looked like he had time and space and he did so well. So I was so pleased. And I do think, honestly, he is still the best 10 that we have available to us. And I would be very keen for him to start.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. We've got a couple more weeks before they're available in Reg 9. And Fergo, I'm sure you're not the only one licking their lips in anticipation at another two players that will come into the mix. They've just got started for Exeter Chiefs. You want to talk to me a bit about Len Ikitau and Tom Hooper?
Yeah, the game between Bath and Leicester was played in sunshine and an absolute great day. But this Exeter match was played in the shittest conditions, and that's why you go up north to learn how to play in shit conditions. It really is. It looked a bit cold. It looked wet. It was raining heavily. It was wet. I will say that Tom Hooper rolled up his sleeves alongside Ethan Roots and really got into the tough stuff. Played really well. Len Ikitau, on the other hand, did not have a great day at the office. Got turned over, I think, 2 or 3 times, knocked on the ball a couple of times, didn't make a whole bunch of impact. And he was really, really tight in and around the ruck. And I just don't know if that's his default thing at the moment. I mean, it works really well in the wet because you can't be playing wide, expansive rugby. But yeah, I don't know. It's just I don't remember him doing this as much prior to this season in Brumbies colours and Wallabies colours. But it just seems to be his go-to move, picking and driving at the moment. And it was just I just want to see him out wider a little bit more. So that was a bit disappointing. They got the win. They were definitely part of that win, that massive win that the Exeter Chiefs had over Harlequins. But yeah, it wasn't. I was more impressed with Tom Hooper's ability to adapt to the system than I was so with Ikitau. So that was a little bit confusing. Also, to be honest, Ikitau looks tired. He looks tired. He looks like he's had a long season, and I'm not surprised by the amount of carries, hit ups, tackles, run meters, games that he's had to get through. So it's going to be a long season for him to get to the end of the Prem, honestly. But I'm very stoked that they're up there now because I think that one game's too harshly to judge what they're going to be like in the Prem, but it was very interesting to see how their first game there ended up, and that's just kind of my snapshot and synopsis of what I saw. Did you manage to catch any of that one, Lockie?
Yeah, I managed to sit down through the mini of that one, and I churned through a couple of stats in the aftermath. You're right, Hooper's performance far away outshone Ikitau's, and it's not surprising. It's harder for, I think, a back to adapt and adjust. You got to remember that Ikitau's still playing his first season of 12 and getting accustomed to that. And you're playing inside Henry Slade, who is a dominant centre and backliner as well. So I'm not surprised that Ikitau was a bit quieter. He had a nice little assist to his centre partner there, but you're right, it was more errors. And I can't imagine he's played in those conditions too many times. It makes it hard playing out wide, and being a bit tighter to the ruck probably lends itself to him just wanting to be involved when the ball isn't coming out as readily. How this is bread and butter stuff for Tom Hooper. He looked so happy, like a pig in shit, charging around out there. He gets his hands on the ball for 13 carries. He was busy in defense. He was really good at just punching through just a little bit of space. Like, he's a hard man to bring down. He's started to fill out from when we first saw him in 2023 under Eddie Jones. He's probably packed on a couple more kilos, and he looks really solid out there. So you've got a bloke that can very easily cover lock, playing a full season of what's likely going to be 6 at Exeter. This is wonderful preparation for Tom Hooper as he eyes off a World Cup berth in 2027. We understand that he's on a longer contract than Ikitau over there at the Chiefs, but wow, what an asset this is going to be for a Tom Hooper to play. I think he's signed on for 2 seasons with the Chiefs of proper hemisphere rugby up there. He's going to come back an even better player.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit fishy. I'm not fishy. I'm a little bit murky on the details of Hooper's contract. I know that Ikitau signed on till the end of halfway through 2026, so that's the end of the Northern Hemisphere club season, and then he's going to be available for test matches in 2026. Hooper, so you're saying that he signed on till the midway through 2027. Is that your understanding?
That's my understanding. I might need to do a quick
Okay.
fact check, so we'll put something in the show notes if it changes. But I think he's
Yep.
definitely got a longer deal than Ikitau, and the view
Yep.
is that he wants to be back and involved with Australian rugby for 27.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with what you said about him so far. That this is a great opportunity for him to grow and learn and really expand his knowledge base about different ways how to play. Because playing against and alongside some of these really good Northern Hemisphere, obviously particularly English, but there are Argentinians, there are Scotsmen, Welsh playing in this competition, and they are just going to obviously Greg Fissilau, great Samoan player there in the pack alongside him. So it's going to be epic. He's going to learn a lot from those kind of guys. Obviously, I'm going to keep a close eye on the Premiership. I'm going to have a little bit of a closer eye on French top 14 as well when I manage to catch those games and watch Will Skelton in those matches. Obviously, as well as Jordan Tyre playing for Perpignan. So that'll be really exciting because I do think that he is someone we've kind of forgotten about. And if he has a kind of return to rugby the way that Louis Rees-Zammit did from the NFL, it's going to be an absolute great comeback story because Louis Rees-Zammit, before his little, I think, ankle injury, he looked stronger and fitter and also possibly even faster, more explosive than he was before he left, which is amazing because that's how he earned his stripes. But Lockie, do you have anything on that updated contract quickly before we wrap up?
Yes. Yes, just a
Yep.
quick one. I've gone through the Exeter Chiefs website. So they said they've signed in for the 25-26 season in full. So it looks like he will be
Till
back and
December.
available for Australia. Yes, all the way through 25 and 26. So
Okay.
we'll just have to wait and see. There, it's a bit fishy and a bit sort of unclear on the details.
Yep.
But we'll just have to wait and see how he goes. He might end up enjoying himself over there, but we'd obviously love to have him back in Aussie rugby sooner rather than later. And same with Len Ikitau.
Absolutely. And that's all we have time for today, Lachie. Thank you so much to you. And apologies to all of you guys for that interruption. We lost our internet signal, and that is just the way that it's going to have to end. But for all you guys, we'll be back later in the week to review the teams that have been announced for Japan versus the Wallabies up in Japan itself, with Eddie Jones going head to head with the Wallabies. We're going to just dissect all that and more leading up in a little bit later in the week, likely Thursday afternoon, possibly a Friday morning drop for that. So keep your eyes peeled. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I want to hear from you guys in the comments what you thought about Australia A, if you've been watching the English Premiership, and also if you want to see any sort of beg your pardon, if you want to see any sort of other content from me here at Off the Ruck, then just let me know in the comments below. But until then, enjoy your week. Keep your eyes peeled on rugby news. Keep your eyes peeled on Rugby Pass for my articles, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.